Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode in the Get Unstuck series. I'm Sarah Archer. I'm a career and leadership coach. And if you are here with me today, please do say hello. I know a lot of people do catch up on replay, but if you're with me live, it's always nice to know. So please do say hello. Let me know where you are listening at the moment. Be great to know that you're here. So I am a career and leadership coach. I work with female leaders to help them create the right kind of career success that's right for them. And I created this series, I guess you could call it, called the Get Unstuck series, to help you focus on either an area of leadership development, personal development, or your career. And I run them every other week for about 15 minutes to give you a little window to maybe just have that time to think about something that's important for you. Because having been a senior leader myself, I know the working week is so full on. It's very hard to find that time. But you can always catch up with the topics. There's a huge back catalogue of these videos on my LinkedIn profile. And I also have a podcast called Unstuck and Unstoppable, which I'll link to in the comments, where you can also catch the same topics, but obviously just on the audio. So the sessions are always very practical, about 15 minutes in length, and there'll always be something you can take away and put into action straight away. And if you've got questions or comments, please do pop them into the chat and I will answer them either as we're going along or come back to them. And if you're watching on replay, hello. If you tag me into your question, I will come back and answer that for you. So let's dive into today's topic, which is navigating toxic stakeholders and managing difficult bosses. And if you've got questions on this, please do ask me, because I know this is a topic that, basically, everybody at some point in their career will have had to navigate some kind of toxicity in the workplace, whether that's a stakeholder, a peer, a boss, or even someone who works in your team. And it can be really, really tricky. So that's why I thought I'd just run through some thoughts around how you could navigate these difficult relationships. Because you've probably had that experience where you've come out of a meeting with either your boss or a senior stakeholder, and you just know that something just fell off, and you just kind of think, why did they shut that down so quickly? Did I explain it badly? Should I have pushed back more? You start asking yourself those questions, and maybe they interrupted you a lot. Maybe they talked over you, dismissed your idea, or maybe they agreed and then they've changed their mind and gone back on their agreement. And you're just left thinking, what happened there? But also maybe thinking, why is this affecting me so much? Why has this knocked my confidence so much? Because these things linger. It's not just difficult in the moment with those people. It's kind of the after effects that those conversations have on you. And it just can start to impact your confidence, make you second guess yourself, makes you start overthinking about how you might approach your next interaction with them. And it kind of changes how you show up. And over time, it can be damaging and it can impact your career. Now, I have certainly experienced this. One that stands out for me is when I'd got a new role as an HR director, and the CEO, who'd been amazing at the interview, suddenly started to just blow really hot and cold with me. And I never knew where I stood with her. Too enthusiastic, and she said I was kind of trying to steal her limelight. She didn't exactly use those words, but that was the intent. Too questioning, and I was trying to undermine her. And it just really started to impact me because I just didn't know how to prepare, how to respond in the moment to those that kind of approach. And I started to withdraw and just take a very neutral stance with her because I just didn't want to be put in that position where I was just feeling really exposed. And it was tough. And if she hadn't left the organisation, because she left luckily a few months after I joined, I probably would have left because I could see how it was beginning to impact me and what the long-term effect might be. Because this isn't just about difficult personalities. This is about how these dynamics then go on and affect your behaviour and ultimately your career. So what's actually happening in those situations? Because I've often worked with clients around having to navigate difficult individuals. And what tends to happen is that then they start to over-prepare for every situation. They start to even rehearse what they're going to say, hold back in those meetings because they want to avoid the confrontation. They avoid challenging certain people, and they try to manage that other person's mood. And on the surface, that might look like being professional, but underneath, it's actually self-protection. And it can push you into being hypervigilant because you're trying to guess what kind of mood they're in today before you approach them. But that makes you then start to become quieter, to withdraw, to just be more cautious in your approach, to be less visible, less influential. And it's not because you lack confidence, it's because the dynamic is shaping your behavior with that particular person. But we need to think about what's actually going on, because if you stay in, what did I do wrong? Because that's where we often go to, isn't it? What did I do wrong in that situation? You stay stuck. And so we need to look at what's actually happening here and just break it down a little bit more so we can understand it, and then we can navigate it. Now, most difficult stakeholders or bosses fall into patterns, and there are obviously lots of patterns out there, but I'm going to maybe just run through the top 3 that I've noticed. So first of all, we've got the controller, and I'm sure you can recognize this one. So this is someone who, they need to be across everything. They struggle to let go. They might override decisions or step in unexpectedly. And with this particular type, this isn't about you. This is about their need to control. Then we've got the political operator, and they are very aware of how they're perceived in the organisation. They want to protect their position, and so they might subtly undermine you. They might take credit for your work. And again, this isn't random behaviour. They're being strategic because they're very sensitive to where the wind is blowing in the organisation, and they don't really care about the impact on you. They just want to protect their position. Then we've got the inconsistent leader, and this one is very common. This is the one I had in the CEO that I mentioned earlier. So this is where they're changing direction. They say one thing, they do another. They leave you feeling unclear or even destabilized, and it creates a lot of overthinking. But here's the key shift for you, is that once you recognize the pattern, then you can actually start to shift from taking it personally to start responding strategically. Now, I had a client who I worked with last year who had basically the inconsistent leader. Well, it was a stakeholder that she was working with, and she was, she was a brilliant leader. She was well respected, strong communicator, but this senior stakeholder just completely threw her. And he was unpredictable, sometimes supportive, sometimes dismissive, sometimes undermining her in meetings. And over time, it was impacting her behavior. She was doing the classic over preparing for every interaction, second guessing her ideas, holding back. And she couldn't avoid him because her area of work brought her into contact with this person on a very regular basis. And she was just then finding she was becoming less visible, less influential, because how she was being perceived was changing because she was holding back from being her authentic self. And the turning point came for her when she stopped focusing on how do I handle him better and started focusing on how do I manage this dynamic differently. And so she began to simplify how she communicated, be more direct. She started to avoid over-explaining and held her position calmly. So she was very grounded. So she wasn't aggressive. She wasn't defensive. She was just very grounded. And the dynamic shifted. So he didn't change at all, but the dynamic shifted because she started showing up as herself and she started avoiding taking it personally. And that's what we're going to talk about now, because I've got 4 things you can do to help navigate these difficult behaviors, difficult conversations, difficult stakeholders. So the first thing is to stop taking it personally. And this is the foundation, because if you fall into thinking, oh gosh, this is about me, I'm doing something wrong, I need to change, then you just keep adjusting yourself. And actually, we need to be asking instead, what is driving their behavior? Because that one question creates some distance and helps you to get clarity. And then the second thing we want to do is understand the dynamic. So understand what's going on. So getting curious and asking, what do they care about? What pressures are they under? And what triggers their behavior? So you're not excusing it, you're just understanding it so that you can navigate it. And then the third thing is then to change how you decide to show up. So, because this is where your power is in how you respond, because you can't, as we all know, you can't change anybody else's behavior. You can only change how you respond to it. So you might, as my client did, be more concise, you might be more direct, you might stop that kind of over justifying when you're presenting an idea, and just holding your position calmly. Because you don't need to match their energy, you just need to stop shrinking in response to it. So the key here is that not taking it personally and positioning it into, okay, let me understand what's going on. Let me understand that dynamic so that I can then decide how I want to respond to it. And then the fourth point is to decide your boundaries, because not everything should be managed. Some things do need to be addressed. And, this is tough, but, sometimes behaviors have to be called out, or sometimes the behavior has to be escalated. And sometimes it might be about limiting exposure to that particular individual, if that is possible, or deciding actually the environment isn't one that you want to stay in. As I mentioned, if my chief exec hadn't left, I probably would have had to, because I could see that the damage it was going to have on me in a long term. Now, as we know, some organisations are not prepared to address behaviour that is unacceptable by certain senior stakeholders or leaders in the organisation. And therefore, that gives you a choice. If you have tried to address it, you've tried to escalate it, but the organisation isn't prepared to address it, then you have to make a choice about, do I stay and just get better at navigating it and protect myself, or do I decide to go? And that's obviously going to be a personal choice, because there is a difference between managing a difficult relationship and tolerating behaviour that impacts you and undermines you. So your action to take away this week would be just to start noticing, where am I changing my behaviour to manage somebody else's? And then ask, is that helping me to show up as the leader I want to be, or is it holding me back? Because that awareness alone is powerful, but then you can also decide how you want to respond to that. Because, strong leadership isn't about just the team you manage or the function you lead. It is also about how you are able to navigate challenging relationships and dynamics, especially upwards, because you're going to come across them in all shapes and forms in all organizations. But remember that you don't have to become harder, you don't have to become more aggressive, you just need to become more intentional about how you respond to those relationships. So I hope this has resonated. I hope those tips have felt helpful. And of course, if you want any support around managing a situation that you might be experiencing currently, then please do get in touch. Send me a message either on LinkedIn or via my website, and we can talk about what you need in terms of support to help you manage that, because sometimes it can be very difficult to do it on your own. So I hope you have a great couple of weeks, and I will see you back here in 2 weeks' time.